She was supposed to meet someone special that night, 2 days before Christmas, at a cafe filled with laughter and warmth. Instead, Beyoncé sat alone, her phone reading aloud a text that shattered her. Your vision impairment and demanding career is too much complication. Take care. Her hands trembled around her white cane. Her eyes burned behind her dark glasses. Maybe this was how her story ended. Ignored, rejected, alone. But then 2 little girls in Christmas dresses appeared at her table, and what they said next changed everything. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Beyoncé had been waiting at the Daily Grind Cafe for 45 minutes when the text came. The man she was supposed to meet had decided she was too complicated before he even met her. Her blindness was too much work. Her demanding job as a charity director was too much pressure. He had made up his mind without giving her a single chance. The rejection hit Beyoncé hard because it confirmed everything she had always feared. No matter how successful she became, no matter how independent she proved herself to be, people would always see her blindness first. They would always see her as a problem to solve instead of a person to love. Beyoncé had spent her whole life trying to be perfect. She kept her apartment organized so she would never trip or lose anything. She worked harder than everyone else at her job to prove she deserved to be there. She never asked for help unless she absolutely needed it. She thought if she could just be perfect enough, people would forget she was blind. But the text message proved that all her efforts were useless. She would always be too much complication. She was getting ready to leave when 2 little girls ran up to her table. They were Lisa and Tesha, 5-year-old twins who attended the women's support group, where Beyoncé volunteered every Thursday. The girls recognized her voice and were excited to see her. They told her their daddy said nobody should be sad in his cafe at Christmas. Their father was Michael, and he owned the Daily Grind. He apologized for his daughters running up to Beyoncé, but he also invited her to stay and join them. He could tell something bad had happened to her that night. He didn't push her to talk about it, but he offered her a different option. He invited her to help them bake Christmas cookies in the cafe kitchen. Beyoncé had never baked anything in her life. Baking was messy and unpredictable, 2 things she always avoided. Her life was built on control and organization. But that night, her controlled life had fallen apart anyway. So she accepted Michael's invitation. The cafe kitchen was nothing like Beyoncé's organized world. It was loud and chaotic. The twins were giggling and talking over each other. Christmas music was playing from somewhere. There were bowls and spoons clattering. Flour was getting everywhere. Michael was giving instructions while also answering the girls' constant questions. It was a kind of environment that usually made Beyoncé nervous. But something strange happened that night. Instead of feeling anxious, Beyoncé started to relax. Michael guided her hands gently, showing her where everything was on the counter. He described what they were making and what each step would feel like. He never treated her blindness as something that needed to be fixed or worked around. He just adapted naturally, the way someone might adjust their cooking method for any new person in the kitchen. The twins were even better. They described everything to Beyoncé without making it seem like a big deal. Lisa told her the dough was the color of sand at the beach. Tesha said the chocolate chips felt like tiny pebbles. They held her hands and helped her feel the shapes they were making. They laughed when Beyoncé's first cookie came out looking like a blob instead of a star. As they baked, Michael told Beyoncé about his life. He had been a corporate lawyer 3 years ago, working long hours at a big firm in the city. He was successful and made a lot of money. But when his wife died suddenly, he realized his daughters needed more than a father who was never home. So he quit his law job and bought this small cafe. It was his wife's dream, and he made it real for her memory and for his girls. Michael's story surprised Beyoncé. Here was someone who had given up success and money to choose family and peace. It was the opposite of everything Beyoncé had been taught. Her parents had always pushed her to achieve more, to prove herself, to never let her blindness slow her down. She had built her entire identity around being successful and independent. The idea of choosing something simple and messy over something impressive and perfect was completely foreign to her. But watching Michael with his daughters, hearing how happy they were in their flower-covered kitchen, Beyoncé started to wonder if she had been chasing the wrong things her whole life. These three people were covered in cookie dough and laughing at silly jokes. They weren't trying to impress anyone. They weren't trying to prove anything. They were just being themselves, enjoying each other's company on Christmas Eve. By the time they finished baking, it was almost midnight. The girls had fallen asleep on the cafe couch, their faces still sticky with chocolate. Michael and Beyoncé sat at one of the small tables, drinking tea and eating the slightly burned cookies they had made together. Michael told Beyoncé that she reminded him of how he used to be, always working, always pushing, always trying to be the best. He said he used to think that was strength, but now he knew it was actually fear. He had been afraid of being ordinary, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of being judged. It took losing his wife to realize that real strength was in letting go of all that fear. Beyoncé listened to Michael's words, and something inside her started to crack. She had spent 28 years building walls around herself, trying to protect herself from rejection and pity. But those walls had also kept out joy and connection. She had been so busy being perfect that she had forgotten how to just be human. That night in the messy kitchen of the daily grind, Beyoncé had felt more alive than she had in years. She had laughed until her stomach hurt. She had gotten flour in her hair and chocolate on her sweater. She had made terrible-looking cookies with two little girls who thought she was wonderful just as she was. And she had met a man who saw her blindness as just one small part of who she was, not the most important thing about her. As Beyoncé finally headed home that night, she realized the blind date that had rejected her had actually given her a gift. If he had shown up, she would have spent the evening trying to be perfect for him, trying to prove she wasn't too complicated. Instead, she had spent it being messy and imperfect with people who liked her that way. Beyoncé went back to the daily grind the next day. She told herself it was just to thank Michael properly for the night before. But deep down, she knew she wanted to see him and the girls again. There was something about their family that drew her in, something warm and real that her organized life was missing. The cafe was busy on Christmas Day. Michael was running around serving customers and making drinks. The twins were sitting at a corner table, coloring Christmas pictures. When they saw Beyoncé come in, they screamed with excitement and ran to hug her. They pulled her to their table and insisted she help them color. Lisa and Tesha described the coloring pages to Beyoncé in detail. There was Santa Claus with his big belly and white beard. There were reindeer with antlers like tree branches. There was a Christmas tree covered in round ornaments. The girls put crayons in Beyoncé's hand and guided her to color inside the lines. They didn't care that she couldn't see what she was doing. They just wanted her there with them. Michael came over during a break and sat down with them. He looked tired but happy. He told Beyoncé that the girls had talked about her all morning. They wanted to know if she would come to their house for Christmas dinner that evening. Michael said she didn't have to, but he would love to have her if she wanted to come. Beyoncé surprised herself by saying yes immediately. She usually spent Christmas alone or at work events. She had told herself she preferred it that way, but the truth was she had just never been invited into someone's real family life before. People either pitied her or admired her, but they rarely just included her naturally. Over the next few weeks, Beyoncé spent more and more time with the Grant family. She went to their house for Christmas dinner and ended up staying until late that night. She came back the day after Christmas to help Michael with the post-holiday rush at the cafe. She joined them for a trip to the park where the girls taught her how to make snow angels by moving her arms and legs in the snow. During these days together, Beyoncé learned more about Michael's life. He told her that losing his wife had destroyed him at first. He had been angry at the world and didn't know how to take care of two small children alone. His parents had wanted him to send the girls to live with them so he could keep his law career. But Michael refused. He knew his daughters needed him, and he needed them. Buying the cafe had been terrifying. Michael didn't know anything about running a restaurant. He burned food constantly at first. He ordered too much of some supplies and not enough of others. He made every mistake possible. But he learned slowly and messily. And now, 3 years later, the daily grind was successful not because it was perfect, but because it was full of love and warmth. Michael told Beyoncé that she lived her life like she was following a perfect map. Every step was planned out. Every possible problem was prepared for. She knew exactly where she was going and how to get there. It was impressive, but it was also exhausting. And maps didn't work when life threw unexpected things at you. Michael said he used to live the same way, but now he lived by a compass instead. A compass didn't tell you exactly where to go. It just pointed you in the right direction and let you find your own path. It meant accepting that you would get lost sometimes, that you would make mistakes, that things would be messy. But it also meant you could enjoy the journey instead of just focusing on the destination. Beyoncé understood what Michael was saying, but it scared her. Her perfect map was how she survived. Without it, she felt like she would be lost and vulnerable. She told Michael that she had to be twice as perfect as everyone else because of her blindness. People were always watching her, waiting for her to fail, ready to say she shouldn't have that important job or live independently. If she let go of her control, she would prove them all right. Michael listened to Beyoncé's fears, and then he said something that changed how she saw herself. He told her that her perfectionism wasn't protecting her. It was a prison. She had built such high walls around herself that nobody could reach her, but she also couldn't reach out. Her blindness wasn't what made her complicated. Her fear of being vulnerable was what made her complicated. He said that real love, real connection, required imperfection. It required showing people your messy parts and trusting they would stay anyway. It required admitting you didn't have all the answers and asking for help sometimes. It required being human instead of being perfect. Beyoncé wanted to argue with Michael, but she couldn't, because deep down, she knew he was right. She had been so focused on proving she didn't need anyone that she had forgotten how good it felt to be needed and to need someone back. She had been so busy being strong that she had forgotten that asking for help was also a kind of strength. The twins showed Beyoncé what it looked like to live without fear of judgment. Lisa and Tesha never worried about being perfect. They made mistakes constantly and just laughed about them. They asked for help when they needed it without feeling ashamed. They showed their emotions openly, crying when they were sad and dancing when they were happy. They lived with their whole hearts, and people loved them for it. The girls also showed Beyoncé something else. They showed her that her blindness didn't have to be something she worked around or compensated for. It could just be part of who she was, no more important than her brown hair or her love of tea. The twins described colors and sights to Beyoncé constantly, but not because they felt sorry for her. They did it the same way they would describe a funny cloud shape to their dad or point out a pretty bird. They were just sharing their world with someone they cared about. One afternoon, Beyoncé and Michael sat in the empty cafe after closing. The twins were upstairs in their apartment doing homework. Michael and Beyoncé had been cleaning up, but they had stopped to just talk instead. The conversation had turned deeper, and Michael asked Beyoncé something nobody had ever asked her before. He asked her what she would do with her life if she wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. If she could let go of the pressure to be perfect and successful, what would she actually want? Beyoncé realized she didn't know the answer. She had spent so long building her career and her independent life that she had never stopped to ask herself if it was what she really wanted. She had assumed that success and independence were the only things that mattered. But sitting in that quiet cafe with Michael, she realized there might be other things that mattered just as much. Things like connection and family and being part of something warm and messy and real. Michael told Beyoncé that he saw her, not just a successful director or the independent blind woman. He saw the person underneath all of that, the person who laughed at silly jokes, who got emotional over children's Christmas songs, who was surprisingly competitive about making the best-shaped cookies. He saw her humanity, her vulnerability, her real self. And he thought that person was beautiful. For the first time in her life, Beyoncé let someone see her without all her armor on. She cried in front of Michael and didn't apologize for it. She told him about how lonely her perfect life had been. She admitted she was scared of letting go of control because she didn't know who she would be without it. She showed him her messy, imperfect, complicated heart. And Michael didn't run away. He listened and understood and stayed. He told her that her imperfections were what made her real and lovable. Her need to be perfect was what had been keeping her isolated, not her blindness. That conversation changed something fundamental in Beyoncé. She started to understand that she had been fighting the wrong battle her whole life. She had been trying to prove she was just as good as everyone else despite her blindness. But maybe she didn't need to prove anything. Maybe she could just be herself, blindness and ambition, and perfectionism and all, and trust that the right people would love her anyway. The Grant family was showing her what that kind of love looked like. They didn't love her because she was impressive or successful. They didn't love her despite her blindness. They just loved her because she was Beyoncé, and that was enough. Beyoncé's life had fallen into a comfortable rhythm over the past few weeks. She would finish work at her charity office and then go straight to the daily grind. She would help Michael close up the cafe, and then they would all have dinner together upstairs in the family's small apartment. The twins would show her their school projects and tell her stories about their day. Michael would cook simple meals and make her laugh with his terrible jokes. It was a kind of ordinary domestic life that Beyoncé had never experienced before, and she loved every minute of it. But then, 3 weeks after that first terrible blind date, Beyoncé received an email that changed everything. It was a job offer from an international charity organization. They wanted her to become their new CEO. The position was in London. The salary was 3 times what she made now. It was everything Beyoncé had been working toward her whole career. The email said they had been watching her work for years. They were impressed by how she had grown her current charity from a small local organization into one of the most successful in the state. They said she was exactly the kind of leader they needed. They wanted an answer within 2 weeks. Beyoncé sat in her office staring at her computer screen, letting her screen reader repeat the email 3 times. This was her dream job. This was proof that all her hard work and sacrifice had been worth it. This was the ultimate validation that she was just as capable as anyone else, blindness or not. But all Beyoncé could think about was Michael and the girls. How could she leave them? They had become her family in just a few short weeks. The thought of going back to her old life, her controlled and perfect and lonely life, made her chest hurt. Beyoncé didn't tell Michael about the job offer right away. She tried to convince herself she could figure out on her own. This was exactly the kind of big decision she was good at making. She would make a list of pros and cons. She would think logically about her future. She would do what was best for her career. But for the first time in her life, Beyoncé's perfect planning system wasn't working. Every time she tried to make a logical decision, her heart pulled her in a different direction. The job in London made sense for her career. But staying here with Michael and the girls made sense for her heart. Michael noticed something was wrong. Beyoncé was distracted and quiet. She wasn't laughing at his jokes or joining in when the twins wanted to play games. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Michael asked her directly what was going on. Beyoncé told him about the job offer. She explained what an incredible opportunity it was, how it was everything she had been working for. She also told him she didn't know what to do because leaving would mean leaving him and the girls. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he told Beyoncé that he couldn't make this decision for her. This was her life and her career. But he also told her something important. He said that 3 years ago, when his wife died, he had to make a similar choice. He could keep his impressive law career and be the successful person everyone expected him to be, or he could give it all up and be present for his daughters. Everyone had told Michael he was crazy to leave his law career. They said he was throwing away his potential. They said he would regret it. But Michael had never regretted it for a single day, because he had chosen what was real over what was impressive. He had chosen love over achievement. Michael told Beyoncé that only she could decide what mattered most to her. But he wanted her to know that if she chose to stay, he would be there. He had fallen in love with her messy and complicated and beautiful heart. And if she chose to go to London, he would understand. But he would miss her every single day. Beyoncé cried when Michael told her he loved her. Nobody had ever loved her like this before. Not because she was impressive or successful, but just because she was herself. Michael loved her perfectionism and her vulnerability. He loved her ambition and her fear. He loved all the parts of herself that she had always tried to hide. But Beyoncé still didn't know what to do. She went home that night feeling torn in two. One part of her wanted the CEO job and everything it represented. The other part wanted Michael and the girls and the messy, warm life they offered. Then, 2 days before she had to give her answer, something happened that made her decision clear. The daily grind had been booked for a huge catering event. A company was having their end-of-year party and had ordered food for 200 people. It was the biggest job Michael had ever taken on. He had been preparing for weeks, making lists and organizing supplies. He thought he had everything under control. But on the day of the event, everything went wrong. Michael's main supplier delivered the wrong ingredients. His part-time staff member called in sick. The company's party location changed at the last minute to a venue across town. And to make everything worse, Michael came down with a terrible flu. Michael called Beyoncé in a panic. He was running a fever and could barely stand. He had no one else to help him. The twins were with their grandparents for the day. Michael was about to cancel the whole event and lose thousands of dollars and his reputation. Beyoncé told Michael she was coming to help. She hung up and immediately left her office. She didn't stop to think about how she would manage to cater an event for 200 people. She didn't make a careful plan. She just knew Michael needed her, and she was going to be there. When Beyoncé arrived at the cafe, she found Michael trying to work despite his fever. She sent him upstairs to rest immediately. Then she did something she had never done before. She asked for help. Beyoncé called everyone she knew. She called her co-workers from the charity. She called the women from the support group. She called the regular customers whose phone numbers Michael had saved. She told them all that Michael was sick and needed help with this big event. And amazingly, people came. Within an hour, the cafe kitchen was full of volunteers. Beyoncé organized everyone based on her skills and what Michael had already prepared. She couldn't see what they were doing, but she listened carefully and gave clear instructions. She tasted everything to make sure the flavors were right. She kept everyone calm when things got chaotic. The women from the support group described everything to Beyoncé as they worked. They told her when the food was ready to be packed. They told her how to arrange everything in the delivery van. They told her when they arrived at the new venue and what the space looked like. Beyoncé had never led anything like this before. It was messy and unpredictable and required constant adaptation. It was everything she usually avoided, but she was good at it. She stayed calm under pressure. She solved problems quickly. She trusted the people around her to do their parts. The event was a huge success. The company loved the food. They gave Michael a massive tip and said they wanted to book him for all their future events. When Beyoncé and the volunteers got back to the cafe, Michael was waiting downstairs. His fever had broken, and he looked much better, but his eyes were red, and Beyoncé realized he had been crying. Michael thanked everyone who had helped. After the volunteers left, he pulled Beyoncé aside. He told her he had never seen anything like what she had done that day. She had taken his disaster and turned it into a success. But more importantly, she had shown him who she really was underneath all her perfectionism and control. She was a leader, yes, but not because she had everything planned out perfectly. She was a leader because she could stay calm in chaos. She could trust others and work with them. She could adapt and improvise and find solutions. These were skills that came from her heart, not from her perfect maps and plans. Michael told Beyoncé that she could be an amazing CEO in London if she wanted to. She had all the skills and intelligence for it. But he also knew that she would be amazing at anything she chose to do, because her real strength wasn't in her planning or her independence. Her real strength was in her heart and her ability to connect with people. That night, in the empty cafe kitchen that smelled like flour and success, Michael told Beyoncé again that he loved her. He said he loved her ambition and her drive, but he also loved her vulnerability and her willingness to ask for help when she needed it. He loved all of her, the perfect parts and the messy parts. And Beyoncé finally understood what she wanted. The CEO job in London would be impressive. It would prove to everyone that she was successful despite her blindness. But she didn't need to prove that anymore. She already knew her worth. And more importantly, she knew what really mattered to her. What mattered was this man who saw her completely and loved her anyway. What mattered were two little girls who made her laugh and taught her how to live without fear. What mattered was being part of a family, messy and imperfect and real. Beyoncé told Michael she wasn't taking the London job. She was choosing him and the girls. She was choosing the life they could build together over the impressive career she could build alone. Michael kissed her for the first time in that flour-covered kitchen, and Beyoncé felt more certain of this decision than she had felt about anything in her entire life. Beyoncé sent her email to the London organization the next morning. She thanked them for the incredible opportunity, but explained that she had decided to stay where she was. She told them she had found something more important than career advancement. She had found a family. The organization was disappointed but understanding. They told her the offer would stay open if she ever changed her mind. But Beyoncé knew she wouldn't. For the first time in her life, she was completely sure about a decision she had made with her heart instead of her head. Telling Michael and the girls was one of the best moments of Beyoncé's life. The twins screamed with joy and jumped on her, hugging her so hard she almost fell over. They made her promise she would never leave them. Michael just held her hand and smiled. He didn't say much, but Beyoncé could feel how happy he was. Over the next few months, Beyoncé's life changed in ways she never expected. She didn't quit her job as director of the charity. She still loved her work and was good at it, but she stopped working 12-hour days. She stopped checking her email constantly. She stopped trying to prove herself every single minute. Instead, Beyoncé made room in her life for other things. She had dinner with the Grant family several times a week. She went to the twin school plays and recitals. She helped Michael experiment with new recipes at the cafe. She learned how to live a life that wasn't perfect but was full. The women at the support group noticed a change in Beyoncé. She seemed lighter, happier, more relaxed. They asked her what was different, and Beyoncé told them the truth. She had stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be human instead. It was harder in some ways, but so much better in all the ways that mattered. 6 months after that terrible blind date at Christmas, Michael proposed to Beyoncé. He did it in the cafe, at the same table where they had first met. The twins helped him plan the whole thing. They had made a banner that said, "Will you marry our daddy?" in crooked letters. Lisa and Tesha described it to Beyoncé in detail, and she laughed and cried at the same time. Michael's proposal wasn't fancy or perfect. He was nervous and stumbled over his words. The ring was simple because he didn't have much money, but it was real and honest and full of love. He told Beyoncé that she had changed his life. She had shown him that it was okay to take risks on love again. She had brought joy back into his family. Beyoncé said yes without hesitation. She said yes to Michael and to the twins and to the messy, unpredictable, beautiful life they would build together. They got married in September, almost a year after their first meeting. The wedding was small and held at the Daily Grind Cafe. The same volunteers who had helped with the catering disaster helped decorate the cafe with flowers and lights. The twins were flower girls and took their job very seriously. Beyoncé's parents came to the wedding. They had been skeptical when she first told them about Michael. They thought she was giving up too much, settling for less than she deserved. But when they saw how happy she was, how loved and accepted, they understood. Her mother cried during the ceremony and told Beyoncé afterward that she looked more beautiful than she had ever seen her. At the reception, Michael made a speech about how Beyoncé had taught him that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone who made you want to be better while accepting you exactly as you were. He said Beyoncé had shown him that strength wasn't about never needing help. Real strength was about being brave enough to be vulnerable. Beyoncé also made a speech. She thanked Michael and the girls for rescuing her from her perfect, lonely life. She told everyone about the terrible blind date that had led her to this moment. She said that the man who rejected her had actually given her the greatest gift. He had freed her to find real love with someone who saw her completely. She talked about how she had spent 28 years trying to prove she was just as good as everyone else despite her blindness. But Michael and the girls had taught her she didn't need to prove anything. She was enough exactly as she was. Her blindness wasn't something to overcome or compensate for. It was just part of her story, the story that had led her to this family. Beyoncé ended her speech by saying that she had finally learned what really mattered in life. It wasn't success or achievement or proving yourself to other people. What mattered was love and connection and being part of something bigger than yourself. What mattered was letting people see your messy, imperfect, complicated heart and trusting them to love you anyway. After the wedding, Beyoncé moved into the apartment above the cafe with Michael and the girls. It was crowded and chaotic. The twins' toys were everywhere. The kitchen was always messy. There was never enough hot water for everyone's showers. It was the opposite of Beyoncé's old organized apartment, and she loved every minute of it. Beyoncé learned what it meant to be a mother. She helped the twins with their homework and took them to the park. She braided their hair in the mornings and read them bedtime stories at night. She kissed their scraped knees and celebrated their small victories. She became part of their daily routine, and they became part of hers. She also learned what it meant to be a wife. She and Michael were partners in everything. They ran the cafe together. They made decisions about the girls together. They supported each other's dreams and held each other during hard times. Being part of a family meant letting go of control. There were mornings when the twins spilled juice on Beyoncé's work clothes right before an important meeting. There were nights when someone was sick and nobody got any sleep. There were arguments about bedtimes and vegetables, and whose turn it was to clean up. It was messy and exhausting, and nothing like Beyoncé's old organized life. But it was also full of love. There were Saturday mornings when they all made pancakes together and sang along to silly songs. There were quiet evenings when the twins fell asleep on Beyoncé's lap while she read to them. There were moments when Michael would kiss her forehead while she was washing dishes and tell her he loved her for no reason at all. Beyoncé found that being a stepmother gave her a kind of purpose she had never found in her career. When she helped Lisa with a difficult math problem or comforted Tesha after a nightmare, she felt like she was making a real difference. Not in the impressive, measurable way her charity work did, but in a small, daily, intimate way that mattered just as much. The twins changed how Beyoncé saw her blindness, too. They never treated it as something sad or limiting. To them, it was just a fact about Beyoncé, like how Lisa was good at drawing and Tesha was good at singing. The girls naturally described their world to Beyoncé without making it feel like charity. They taught Beyoncé that her blindness didn't have to be the most important thing about her. It was just one part of a much bigger story. One year after the wedding, Beyoncé was sitting in the cafe on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The twins were at school. Michael was in the kitchen testing a new recipe. Beyoncé had finished her work for the day and was just sitting, listening to the sounds of the cafe around her. She thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago. That woman had been sitting at this exact table, heartbroken and alone, convinced she was too complicated for love. That woman had believed she needed to be perfect to be worthy. She had thought her blindness was something to overcome, something that made her less than everyone else. But that woman had been wrong about everything. Beyoncé's blindness hadn't made her less. It had actually led her to more. It had led her to Michael, who taught her that vulnerability was stronger than perfection. It had led her to Lisa and Tesha, who taught her that joy came from being yourself, not from impressing others. It had led her to a life that was messy and chaotic and absolutely full of love. The man who had rejected her on that blind date had called her complicated, and he was right. Beyoncé was complicated. She had a demanding career and a disability and strong opinions and deep emotions. But she had learned that being complicated wasn't a bad thing. Complicated meant interesting. Complicated meant real. Complicated meant human. And the right person didn't want simple. The right person wanted real. Michael loved her because she was complicated, not despite it. He loved her ambition and her blindness and her perfectionism and her vulnerability. He loved all of her, the whole messy package. Beyoncé had also learned something else over the past 2 years. She had learned that her blindness was actually a gift, not because it made her special or inspirational, but because it had forced her to develop other skills. It had made her more aware of people's voices and emotions. It had taught her to listen deeply and pay attention to details others missed. It had given her empathy for anyone who felt different or left out. Most importantly, her blindness had led her to this cafe on that Christmas Eve 2 years ago. If that man hadn't rejected her, if she hadn't been sitting alone and heartbroken at that table, she never would have met Michael and the girls. Her biggest rejection had turned into her greatest blessing. Michael came out of the kitchen and sat down next to Beyoncé. He was covered in flour again, the way he always was. He took her hand and asked her what she was thinking about. Beyoncé told him she was thinking about how grateful she was. Grateful for that terrible blind date. Grateful for his daughters running up to her table. Grateful for every messy, imperfect, beautiful moment that had led her to this life. Michael squeezed her hand and told her he was grateful too. Grateful that she had said yes to baking cookies that night. Grateful that she had been brave enough to let go of her perfect life. Grateful that she had chosen them. That evening, When the twins came home from school, they all went upstairs for dinner. It was a regular Tuesday, nothing special. They ate spaghetti that Michael had made too spicy again. The twins argued about whose turn it was to set the table. Someone knocked over a glass of water. It was chaotic and messy and absolutely normal. And as Beyoncé sat there listening to her family laugh and argue in live, she realized this was everything she had ever wanted. Not the CEO job in London, not the impressive career, not the perfect, controlled life she had built to protect herself. This messy, loud, imperfect family. This man who saw her completely. These two girls who loved her unconditionally. This life that was full of complications and joy in equal measure. The man from the blind date had been right about one thing. Beyoncé was complicated. Her life was complicated. But she had learned that a little complication was what made life worth living. I'm on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers before the New Year Festival, and I really need your help to get there. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button. It would mean the absolute world to me. Also, please drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, and if you'd like to hear more stories from me. I love hearing from you all. Thank you for watching.